They expect you to shout. They expect chaos. They expect fists flying and voices raised. Why? Because that's how the unwise lose, through noise, through emotion. But what if you never raised your voice? What if you never lifted a finger, yet still dismantled your enemies entirely? What if destruction came quietly, without warning, without trace? That's the art of the sovereign. Today we unravel a vicious paradox: how to win a war without a battlefield, how to erase without appearing, not through violence but through psychological supremacy. That's the real throne. True power isn't counted in battles won, but in battles never fought. Real dominance is when opposition never forms, when the mere idea of resistance dissolves. The greatest rulers don't break their enemies with force. They design a world where defiance dies in silence. This is the invisible war, the unseen game, a conflict without swords, only shadows. The weak shout. The wise shift the ground under their enemies' feet. A fool lunges with fury, exposing every weakness. The master watches, calculates, and then poisons the very root of the enemy's strength, often without ever being noticed. The deadliest power doesn't act. It manipulates perception. The sharpest destruction isn't loud. It's psychological, slow, surgical, unrelenting. The moment your enemy doubts himself, distrusts allies, crumbles under a distorted identity, that's when you've already won. You never confront. You confuse. You whisper contradictions, twist narratives. You warp their reality until they implode, chasing ghosts you placed. A ruler doesn't push. He lets his rival walk into rooms where every path is a trap. The untrained believe conflict begins at confrontation. The powerful know it begins in silence, long before swords are drawn. Often it never needs to begin at all. To master this, you become the architect of subtlety. You drain your opponent's oxygen, not physically, but socially. You isolate them from within. Turn friends into doubters. Let paranoia fester in the dark. You remain calm, composed, detached, while quietly shifting the ground. When they fall, it won't be by force. It'll be because their foundation crumbled, because you quietly dissolved it. Psychological warfare turns instinct into weapon. Pride becomes poison. Ego becomes bait. The desire to prove, to fight, to correct the narrative. It all becomes your trap. You offer silence. They interpret it as challenge. They begin chasing your absence. The more they reach, the colder you become, until they're left exhausted, raging at a void. In this war, fists are irrelevant. Presence, or absence, wins. You appear when needed, disappear when it wounds. You explain nothing, defend nothing, justify nothing. A true ruler never explains himself. He doesn't need to. Mystery is power. The less you reveal, the more control you wield. Victory is never about your enemy's defeat. It's about making them destroy themselves, trying to reach you. The world is full of noise. Most people shout to be heard. But a ruler? He controls the room with silence. His energy unsettles people. They either kneel before it, or burn themselves trying to match it. And when they break, the ruler never moved. You don't win through righteousness. You win through disappearance. When your enemy crumbles and you remain untouched, unmoved, and undefeated, that's mastery. The most dangerous man is the one who doesn't react when the world expects him to. In a culture of impulse and validation, the detached man reigns, not because he feels nothing, but because he weaponizes restraint. This is strategic indifference, not emotional vacancy, but emotional control. The sovereign doesn't deny emotion. He trains it. His heart doesn't rule him. His silence becomes sword. While others rage, he watches. Their emotions expose them. His calm conceals him. Reaction is weakness. A loud man is a broken man. The moment pride is poked, ego erupts, and you see everything you need to conquer him. But the composed man, he reveals nothing. His silence unnerves. His stillness cuts deeper than words. That is true control. When people can't provoke you, they fear you. When they can't predict you, they doubt themselves. And in that doubt, they unravel. Indifference isn't passivity. It's deliberate cruelty cloaked in peace. It's not ignoring. It's erasing their significance, denying them what they crave most, attention. Every manipulator seeks your energy. They feed off reactions, starve them, and they disappear. This is how rulers destroy, by denying others access to their mind. Strategic indifference humiliates without effort. You don't defend your name. You don't explain your silence. You rise above the battlefield and let others scream into the void. Your restraint becomes torture. Your absence becomes their obsession. Your calm becomes their chaos. Every time they're denied response, their identity cracks. You become the unbreakable mirror, the wall that doesn't move, the ghost they cannot catch. This strength is built alone. In solitude, emotion is trained like soldiers. Compliments do not sway. Attacks do not wound. Kindness is inspected. Hostility is anticipated. You feel everything, but express nothing unless it serves strategy. You speak only to signify victory, not to argue, not to defend. The masses react. The ruler designs the reactions. You don't drown in chaos. You orchestrate it. You create storms your enemies walk into alone. While they scream louder, you speak less. While they act out, you remain, until they begin collapsing from within, questioning, doubting, unraveling. Still, you do nothing, and that silence becomes their ruin. Each time you show restraint, you strip them of energy. They arrive in flames. You offer them ice. Your stillness becomes a mirror reflecting their desperation. Their unraveling becomes your masterpiece. This isn't apathy, it's domination. The ability to hold peace so tightly that others break trying to disturb it. In this court of power, the sharpest weapon isn't steel, it's reputation. A ruler knows this. The world follows perception. If you control perception, you control fate. You don't need to destroy reputations through lies. You use whispers, timing, subtle nudges. Let others complete the assassination with gossip. Reputation is slow poison. It infects through silence, executed with elegance, finalized by collective judgment. You never attack directly. You insinuate. You don't confront. You observe. You let the story unfold, nudged by your invisible hand. One whisper is enough. One shifted perception. One amplified flaw. And the enemy becomes questionable, then dismissible, then mocked. And when mockery replaces fear, the destruction is absolute. No man survives being seen as a joke. Defeat can be recovered from. Humiliation cannot. That's the assassin's method. That's the king's weapon. Not action, but decay. Not assault, but irrelevance. You don't need to defeat your enemies. You need only make them forgettable. Irrelevance is exile. The type of exile not of place, but of presence. The kind that leaves a man physically near, but spiritually discarded. True rulers don't isolate their enemies. They elevate themselves so high that enemies disappear beneath them. Their noise fades. Their existence dims. The court no longer sees them, only the throne. This is psychological exile. Not removal, but overshadowing. The king rises. The crowd forgets who stood beside him. Power decides relevance. Attention decides value. You simply control both. The rival is left present, but obsolete. Their words echo, but no one listens. They speak, but no one reacts. They are tolerated, not respected, seen, but not considered, alive, but irrelevant. You don't banish them. You let them watch. Watch the court move without them. Watch power flow around them. Watch attention flee from them. That is the final cruelty. No blow, no strike, just decay. And everyone sees it. He becomes a memory walking among the living. He remembers influence, recognition. But those days are gone. And the ruler, he never looks his way. There's no war to point to, no public loss, no clear attack. Just fading, drifting, obsolescence. Everyone notices, everyone shifts. He is now endured, not revered. And still, the king remains untouched. That's true power. Not in crushing threats, but in rising so high they become irrelevant. This is strategic exile, a quiet erasure, a dismantling not through battle, but through brilliance. You build, you rise, you take ground they once thought was theirs, and before they realize it, the court no longer needs them. The future has moved on without them. This is the mind of the true ruler: precision, silence, restraint. He doesn't rage, he engineers calm. He doesn't confront, he elevates. He doesn't react, he watches the world rearrange itself in his favor. He speaks with absence, wields silence as power, wins without showing his hand. And his enemies, they vanish, forgotten by the very world they once tried to control. This is how power is preserved, not in noise, but in stillness, not through struggle, but through presence, not through destruction, but through disappearance. That is the true reign of the king. There is a moment every man dreads, but few recognize, when he's still speaking, and no one is listening, when he's still moving, but the world no longer shifts with him. That is the quiet death of relevance. And it's not caused by conflict, it's caused by the calm you designed. You didn't raise a hand, you didn't shout, you simply made him unnecessary. This is not power in the traditional sense. This is influence that shapes silence itself. You enter a room and the atmosphere bends, not because of volume, but because of presence. People align, attention shifts, and without trying, you define the hierarchy. You don't win by standing in opposition, you win by standing alone, above, beyond, unreachable. Because when your enemy tries to explain your silence, tries to define your calm, tries to decode your lack of reaction, he falls deeper into his own unraveling. He assigns motives to your quiet. He imagines plans in your absence. He battles a fiction of you that never reacts, and that fiction consumes him. You are not in the game, you are above the board. The pieces move for you. Because you've understood a truth that most overlook. Energy is the new battleground. They want yours. They want to provoke you, pull a reaction, see a flicker of weakness. But you give them nothing, and nothing hurts. Nothing makes them question themselves. Nothing becomes the silence they cannot bear. You become the unanswered question in their mind, the presence that haunts even in absence. This is when the war becomes art. Because your silence begins to rearrange the battlefield. You no longer chase victory. You engineer collapse. Slow, inevitable. You remove the spotlight, not by cutting power, but by moving the stage. You redirect praise, shift conversations, celebrate others, until the crowd no longer remembers who your rival was. They're still there, talking, demanding, but the room no longer listens, not because of attack, but because of elevation. And here is the master stroke. You never deny them access. You just ensure they feel uninvited. That feeling breaks a man more than any rejection. To be allowed in the room, but feel no one cares you're there. That's the slow bleed of status. That's the erosion of identity. This is the exile you orchestrate. Not physical, but emotional. Not separation, but reduction. And all the while your hands are clean, your words neutral, your image pristine. You are seen as composed, above the drama, unmoved. This is the throne's greatest power. It casts shadows long enough to bury rivals without lifting a sword. And in that darkness, they decay. Their relevance dissolves, their voice fades, and their memory lingers only in their own mind. They remember what they were, while you define what is. There is no louder humiliation than silence in response to noise. When the world watches someone unravel, and the king says nothing, that is the moment power shifts permanently, because the king has already won. Victory was never in confrontation. It was in contrast. He remains composed. While they chase echoes, he remains stable, while they swing at shadows. Eventually, they look around and realize no one is watching, no one is clapping, no one is reacting. They are performing for a crowd that left long ago. And the king? He remains in place, not as a warrior, but as the architect of perception. Because he understands a law few accept. People don't follow strength. They follow control. Not the control that forces, but the control that shapes emotion. When you do not react, you gain gravity. When you do not explain, you gain mystery. When you do not flinch, you gain fear. This is emotional gravity, and it pulls everyone toward you without a word. You do not chase loyalty. You become the axis around which loyalty orbits. People admire those who are not shaken. They follow those who don't need to speak, and they fear those who don't need to defend themselves. So you must train for this. You must be willing to let people speak without interruption. Let rumors float without correction. Let your name be tested in fires you don't attend. Because every time you do not respond, you signal that you are above what others are drowning in. You don't show strength by crushing the noise. You show strength by making it irrelevant. And while they burn, you expand. Silence, in the hands of the ruler, is not passive. It is strategic erosion, a slow unraveling of false power. A pressure applied not by force, but by indifference. You let them watch themselves fall. You give them front-row seats to their own disintegration. And you? You are untouchable, not because you fought harder, but because you never needed to fight at all. The game was never war. The game was perception. Control that, and you become unchallengeable. The world will call you cold. Let them. They call the sun hot too, but they still bow to its light.